We're live. We took last week off because I was really busy, and this week didn't really have a ton of fights. So we could just kind of fit them into one segment. I think where should we start, Dakota? I feel like we should really start with the fight that hasn't happened, Moses Itauma versus Dillian Whyte, and then that can piggyback into the state of boxing. And oddly, we will get to the Duarte-Kenny Sims fight in the second half of the program. Traditionally, we don't do it that way, but I feel like that's the way this one should be done.
Yeah, there's things about this matchup that I think are interesting, but the common sense, at least instinct that I'm having is that it's going to be a really easy fight for Itauma. I can't remember if I've seen Dillian Whyte fight since he fought with Jermaine Franklin, a fight that I don't really think that he won, and he looked very beatable in that fight, frankly. And I just can't imagine that anything's improved, at his age since that fight, but I wouldn't put it past him to work really hard and be ready for this thing. But I think that Itauma is what we might call like a freak of nature. I mean, I don't recall seeing a teenager that fights the way he does, that's as destructive the way he is outside of like maybe Mike Tyson. It's very rare at this age that you have somebody so dominant. And so I think on paper, it's a one-sided, probably quick beatdown, but you got to respect a teenage kid for taking, what was one of the guys in British boxing of his era and who's been in there with a who's who of his era. And you got to give it up to Whyte for taking that risk with a kid that he clearly, in many ways, probably doesn't have any business being in with at this point in his career. So I think it's a one-sided fight, but I respect the matchup.
Our guy Julius Armstrong in the chat says Itauma by murder. It's hard for like the thing about this fight for me, right? And I can only speak through my lived experience. Whyte, and then Julius says Whyte is a sacrificial lamb is another hot take. It's just hard to look at pathways to victory for Whyte, right? Like the pathway to victory is a right hand, a left hook, landed something big. It changes Itauma, shakes him up, and he goes to a place he hasn't been in a fight, and then that starts things going. There's no like game plan for me that okay, he's gonna, if he does this one thing, he can keep up in the fight. And I think that's where my interest is limited in this fight. Is you have someone where they have all, you talked about the obvious, right, and in a good way, right? Because I probably wouldn't have said it. Itauma's young. He's trending like a Tyson-like fighter. And on top of that, he's getting all these big wins, knockouts. What does that do? It builds your momentum. It builds your confidence. And you're going in with Dillian Whyte, who I think we can both safely say his confidence is going the wrong direction. He's taken these big fights, and he's no longer able to separate. His power isn't looking as good as it once was. Maybe that comes down to speed. He's aging, and he can't land the same shots. But to me, this just feels like a fight where you got a young guy with all the confidence in the world and an older guy who's just kind of looking like he's close to the end. I think the last exceptional Dillian Whyte performance I saw was when he fought Joseph Parker. Maybe you can refresh my memory. I think that's like 2019, which is 6
to me. I think the fights with Chisora are classics, and Chisora's had that staying power. So I have respect for those wins. I thought the fact that it wasn't the best performance was just that he won the rematch with Povetkin, I think had meaning. But I think, like you said, man, Moses is getting these quick knockout wins. But I think like Edgar Berlanga a couple of years ago, when you're doing that, it's amazing. But there's still a lot of things we don't know about you. And I think that Whyte's best hope is to be able to show him something that he hasn't seen before and tap into that experience of being in with Joshua, being in with Fury, being in with Povetkin, being in with Chisora, being in with who's who. Find something that the kid hasn't seen. I think that's his best hope.
The hardest thing is we're talking about intangibles. We're not talking about technique. We're not talking about anything. We're talking about being tough, being durable, taking fights to uncomfortable. These are not technical traits. These are byproducts of typically being the less talented fighter and going, okay, we're going to have adversity in the fight. The language you're using is we accept these early rounds are going to be hard. That's kind of the language you're using. And then you have to see it. I do think with Itauma, he's the best prospect in boxing. He's probably a contender at this point. But there also needs to be, at a certain point, he needs to face that durable guy who can take him rounds, because that is part of his development. Because what we've seen with these young punchers in the modern era is if you don't get that test, you don't get it at the highest level. You just jump into that highest level, and you really need that guy who serves as an in-between. And maybe Dillian Whyte serves this function in this fight, but you need to get that 12 rounds experience at a high level.
I'd like to see him in with some younger guys, so, you know, maybe like a Tony Yoka, you know, somebody who's a little closer to their prime, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think Itauma is interesting. It's interesting that he's already headlining cards. There's a lot of excitement about him. Love Mr. Fox's comment. Look at this. That's a good one, bro. What about Zam Kavasky versus Taramana? Someone saying hi in the chat. A lot of people jumping on right now. I don't know. Like, to me, Itauma is someone that's very exciting, and I'm excited to watch his career. Dillian Whyte, I haven't really been excited about for years. I was pretty low on even in 2021 when he fought Tyson Fury. I didn't view that the same way as most people. Like, this is this big guy. I mean, I felt like there was a huge level gap there when people thought that was a more competitive fight. So, I mean, I'm excited to see Moses back. I'm sure Dillian Whyte, because when you look at his career, he's someone that trains hard. I'm sure he's going to show up in shape and give it his all. I just think that this is going to probably be a rough one for him.
I agree.
Now let's go to the people's main event, the Dakota main event. We got, is it the WBA featherweight champion, Nick Ball, taking on Sam Goodman. Dakota, give us your analysis of this fight.
I like the matchup. To me, it's the closest thing to a main event. It's like a true 50-50 with two guys in their primes. Goodman, I have not seen since he fought Rais Salim. Has he moved up to featherweight prior to this, or is this his first go?
Okay, let me go disappear and do some research.
Well, I think that would be interesting to know. But if it is his first time at 126 pounds, he's in with like a guy that's made out of some fucking little bricks or something. He's like a bag full of rocks when he's coming at you. I mean, there's a real, and we've talked about this. It borders on dirty and just sometimes is straight up dirty and physical. And as good of a boxer as Sam Goodman is, it's hard for me to imagine he's going to have the physicality to keep a guy like Nick Ball off of him, who will jump in, who will use rough and dirty tactics to close the range, as he's had to do his whole career, being a shorter guy. I'm guessing in every single one of his fights, being about 5'3". So, you know, I just think Sam Goodman's a hell of a fighter. It's a shame he never got to actually get in the ring with Inoue, but it's a tough sell for me to see how he keeps this guy off of him.
Okay, so half-baked research. He has fought Sam Goodman's fought all the way up at 135 in 2021 in like a stay busy against a 3-6 opponent, Daniel Carr. Followed that up with one appearance coming in just under 125.5 against an 18-4 opponent. And then he fought Miguel Flores at what I assume is a 125-pound catch weight when they both came in at 120, a little under 125. Those are his appearances. His last fight was against Cesar Espinoza at 123. They both weighed in. And before that, he had a fight at 122. So I can get into my analysis, but that's my research right there.
So essentially, he's a natural 22-pounder that has had the capacity to fight at higher weights. I just don't know if that's going to, you know, if that lightweight fight is going to prepare him for the kind of discomfort that Nick Ball is going to put him under. I like that fight, by the way. I just want the truth. That's a good matchup. You muted, Bob.
We got the greatest chat in all of boxing. I just want the truth. Itauma versus Frank Sanchez, that's a great fight. That kind of presents that problem I want, right? Whyte looked like a tub of lard his last 3 fights. Strong take. Ball on upset alert. Ball has slow feet. Goodman gonna embarrass him. to me, this fight.
Listen, I think it's possible, bro. I just think he fights dirty and physical enough that I don't know that he's gonna if Ray Vargas couldn't keep him off, I don't know if Sam Goodman can. I don't know. If he does, that's an incredible accomplishment.
So I'm more like, it feels like there's two schools of thought. There's people that are like, and I get it. So let me break down what I'm thinking. And I'm doing that annoying thing where I'm thinking, but I'm not talking to the podcast audience. So I'm thinking about it, but I'm not doing it. One thing that I think people look at is Nick Ball is undersized for this division. He's a smaller guy, and he's a guy who has an untraditional way of fighting. And because he has an untraditional way of fighting, these are the guys that could get upset out of nowhere. So I feel like because you're looking at a guy who, a lot of what brings Nick Ball to the dance is physicality. And those physical fighters, they don't get to, I hope he's a relevant fighter in 2030, but more often than not, guys that are physical don't make it to 2030 as a top name champion fighter because they wear themselves.
Not a terrible defensive fighter though, Lukie. He's not a Jarrett Hurd. You know what I mean?
That's not fully what I'm saying, but I'm saying like anytime Nick Ball gets in the ring, the fight's going to be physical. And it's not like he's going to just go into title fights and he's going to leave sore, basically. Even if he doesn't take punches, his body is going to be sore. His training camp is going to be sore, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I do feel that a mover could give him some issues, right? But it's impressive Goodman beat Rai-Salim. My thing is momentum. If Goodman wins this, he's a very special fighter because he's basically coming in off of like domestic level fights and then beating one of the top guys in the division. I just think it's hard to win a fight like this without like a precursor fight, a fight that gets your enthusiasm and gets you revved up. I just think it's very hard to come into these type of matchups off of kind of developmental bouts and maybe even that Inoue hangover. Maybe the Inoue hangover is how he does it. He has a chip on his shoulder. I never got to fight Inoue, and he brings that in. Maybe that's how he does it. I see the path to victory. He's able to box and catch him. I just think that this is a very, very tough matchup for Goodman.
It's a tough matchup, man, but I respect the matchmaking on this one. I like that the fight is happening. A great example of a good mover is Ray Vargas, right? Ray Vargas has great feet. He's honestly been one of those guys that people call kind of boring because he's such a mover and he's a defense first guy. And Nick Ball couldn't really make anything happen for about 6 rounds. Now, Ray Vargas is 6 feet tall. He's a world champion, right, for several years prior to that. But it did catch up to him, right? In that 8th round, when Nick started making it rough and put him on his ass a couple of times, and it wound up being a draw, which I felt like was fair at the time. It's just a matter of, is it going to catch up to Sam Goodman?
Well, and our guy Man K Crazy, shout out to Man K Crazy. Brad Strand gave Goodman the cut in sparring, he says. Strand is in the red Everton gym with Ball. So it sounds like there might be some intel there. And Julius Armstrong said, washed Ronnie Rios and TJ Dahoney were landing clean and often until the stoppage. I think a part of that too is I think sometimes Ball gets hit clean. Sometimes he rolls the shots. But I think there's like a level with him that I used to miss with good pressure fighters. Like maybe you missed this, where they're losing rounds almost intentionally, putting a heavy pressure on you, but they're not picking it up. So they're coming forward. They know they hit harder. Golovkin would do this in some fights with boxers where you go, oh man, he's getting outboxed. But then when you really know what you're watching, you're seeing a guy who's really just putting a lot of pressure on a mover because they're trying to do their damage in that 5, 6, 7. That's when they're trying to land the body shots. And then they're really trying to get to him in those late rounds. I think some of that is what
make them do something that they can't maintain.
Exactly. Like they kind of weaponize pace. You see it with Sabril Matisse. I think Matisse and Ball have some similarities where Matisse is losing rounds early, but he's forcing guys to fight way at capacities you can't maintain.
Yep.
And then Man K Crazy says, Tank gives up early rounds too, and Lomachenko with the computer. Remember, he had to him and Crawford had to download.
Usyk, Crawford. There's a ton of guys that, you know, some of the smartest fighters just take their time to see what you want to do before they make a firm decision.
Let's talk about the rest of the undercard. Dakota, why don't you start?
I don't know that I know the rest of the undercard, Lukie, to be honest. I just saw my main event, Nick Ball and Sam Goodman.
Well, I thought you would have known one. It's a friend of the program, Abraham Nova, taking on Raymond Ford.
Oh, yeah. We were talking about this today.
I would have expected that you would have got that one, but we all miss some cues here and there. Fight's going to go one of two ways, right? It's either going to be like Ray Ford has a sensational performance and kind of really announces himself, or this is going to be a fight of the year type fight. I feel like there's only two ways this fight can go, because I feel like Nova does have some real potential given his skill set and abilities, and this could be his last shot. And guys with his ability, if they lay it on the line, this could be a show stealer. Or I guess it comes down to, how does the fight start and when the adversity hits? Because I think this is going to be one where I see more of how people are talking Nick Ball versus Sam Goodman. I see Ray Ford versus Nova more like that, where Nova's going to try to initiate and Ray Ford's going to kind of be hard to hit, more elusive early in that fight. And I think the big thing for this is, does Nova get dejected if the fight starts not going his way? Or does he find a way to kick it up another gear and kind of take over?
Bro, you know how we feel about Nova. You know, he's been a guy that's just taken the good fights, and there's not a lot of bullshit with Nova. You just see him on cards in good fights, and it's that simple. But over the last, really since the Shock fight, right? Because the Shock fight was actually a really good performance from him. That just hasn't been there. And it's tough to know if that's making that weight when he's a pretty big guy. You know,
I gotta defend him here. The Cortez fight was a good performance. He just didn't get the decision.
I don't think it was, man. I got to be honest. I thought he was so incredibly hittable in that fight, regardless of whether you thought he won it or not. That wasn't the guy I saw ringside against Shock. It wasn't the same level.
Yeah, and then after the Humberto Galindo fight, Nova loses top rank. So he wasn't with them, so he had to go to the regional scene. Fights on Team Combat League 13 times, you know. They ask in the chat, does Ford not hit as hard as Humberto Galindo? I think Humberto Galindo hits really hard.
With that fight, it's not going to be about how hard Ray hits. It's going to be about his accuracy. And I think he's one of the sharpest shooters going right now. I was at his last fight on the undercard of Boots. And he was just so accurate with everything he was throwing. He was picking the right shots at the right time. And you talk about momentum, Lukie. I mean, Ray's been in the hard fights now. Like, he's a genuine contender champion type of guy.
He's a former champion now.
He's an elite fighter. And Nova has not looked his best in the last year and a half. So when we talk about momentum, one guy's momentum is going up, one guy's momentum is going down. You know, that being said, bro, right? Like, I don't think this is a do or die for Nova. I think it's a matter of a good performance. If he has a good performance against Ray Ford and doesn't win, how does that hurt his career? It only kind of makes him.
I think he's getting to a point. Relevance. He's getting to a point where, you know, you lose a few of these fights and then the paychecks change. How do you stay motivated? And I think he's getting to that point where it's like, is he, if you lose another one and you feel like, what do I have to do to win? Does that momentum start to go the wrong way in the career?
100%. But I think having a close competitive fight with Ray Ford changes his momentum just based on the last couple of fights.
Also on this undercard, we got your guy. I know you're a huge fan of this guy, Filip Hrgovic. He's taking on David Adeleye. I have no clue what to expect from this. I haven't seen much of Adeleye. I know that in my newsletter, people want me to study footage of him. Hrgovic is a fighter I can't predict at all. You know, when he was coming up, he looked sensational. And then as an elite level fighter, he strikes me as a guy that can't really make it to the second half of the fight. You know,
yeah, it's been a little bit of a flop. It's been a little bit of a flop, and we've seen I think especially in the Dubois fight, because there is something about the Zhang fight where, you know, he gutted it out and made it to the final bell, and I thought he edged it. With the Dubois fight, you just saw him kind of relent eventually after a certain amount of pressure, and then once you have a performance like that, it takes something really special to kind of command that respect back when somebody's already just gotten in your grill and you had nothing for him.
Yeah, and also Mankey Crazy, we need to see if Filip Hrgovic is in shape. So let's go through the rest of what's happening.
Just real quick, Lukie, I will say a couple years ago, like you said, I felt like that this was a guy with championship potential, and he's not an old guy yet. Like I think there is still a place for him to kind of right the ship, but I don't know if this is the guy he can do it against.
I mean, the guy, I've seen tape. It's a very limited physical guy. It shouldn't, in theory, be an issue. But I mean, at the same time, he's making fights that I wouldn't assume be issues hard. You know, he's making fights a lot harder than they should be. Okay, one thing that I think for the enthusiast of our program that they should be aware of, Wednesday, we all like midweek boxing. We got the WBC Grand Prix going on. I don't know if you've watched any of these. They are frigging fun. It's basically top level fighters fighting in a tournament, featherweight, heavyweight, various divisions. One fighter who stood out to me particularly is the American Troy Nash Jr., sensational friend of the program. He is basically beaten 2 undefeated fighters. He's fighting his 3rd undefeated fighter if he wins this tournament at about 20, 21 years old. Hard to not call him the prospect of the year. I feel like because this tournament is so boxing centric, and it's like basically a USA boxing tournament, but with undercard pro fighters, a lot of people aren't watching it because there's no hoopla around it. It's just all substance. It's just all competitive fights. Are you going to tune into this?
Definitely. This is the zone, right?
It's the zone, and I believe it sometimes shows on YouTube. So I believe it might be a dual cast, but it's for sure to zone. But I really recommend for anyone that just feels bitter about the sport, or you don't feel great, oh man, where's the sport going? This Grand Prix is one of the funnest things. Corey Erdman has been on the call. He actually does research. So like you learn facts about these random fighters. Yeah, I just think it's just a really entertaining product. You're seeing a lot of urgency, quarterfinals. Next, I believe, will be the semis, right? If my math is right. And then we're at the final. So it's potentially 5 fights in 1 year for a fighter taking all good fights. I mean, it's quite a fun thing for me to see. So I really enjoy it. There's a lot of negativity around where boxing's going. We're probably going to get into that segment probably right now. I guess we can get into that segment. But I think the Grand Prix has been one of the better things this year.
I'm looking forward to it, man.
What is the state of boxing right now?
Man, we've had multiple kind of off-air conversations about this, man, and I can't remember a moment, and I don't want to be like hyperbolic or overstated or whatever, but I can't remember a moment in boxing where multiple major promoters had no U.S. fight dates, and also multiple major promoters have no fight dates, period. And we're seeing some shifts in boxing that have happened incrementally, between Turki Al-Sheikh seeming to come in as a partner with established promoters, now becoming a competition to those promoters to some extent. We're seeing, Dana White try to buy his way into boxing and creating his own sort of UFC-like structure outside of the structure that exists currently in boxing, which you could see how the fighters in the UFC feel about that structure. I'm not sure that's a good thing to come to boxing. But it's a weird thing to look over the schedule and see it be this empty. It's a weird thing to have multiple weeks where there just isn't really anything going on. It's we're in a definite transitional period, and I couldn't tell you kind of what's on the other side, but the only thing I'm really surprised about is how few people we see say this. You don't see Oscar talking about, we don't have any dates right now. Like, you don't see anybody on the top rank side talking about what's going on with the TV deal. Where are you going to put that massive stable of guys that you've been developing, you know, to stay active, that's not off air? So I've found the silence really weird, and I find the not knowing what the future of the sport, I feel like it's as uncertain as I can remember it being.
Well, I think boxing is always going to be in a good place to a certain extent, right? Because it's going to be, you know, we're fight fans and we can always get the fights we want. But in terms of the U.S. market, I really think Las Vegas is kind of becoming irrelevant with boxing. And that's kind of one of the things that I think we didn't understand as fans, how much that Las Vegas controlled U.S. boxing and enticed U.S. boxing. I'm not sure the number, but there's not a lot of fights happening in Vegas anymore. Really, if you think about it, there's not that thing. The big fight weeks don't seem as big in Vegas. And right now, as you said, all the major promoter official fight, I'd say developmental. We got Crawford, Canelo coming up. That's a big one, right? But it's a time where, you know, we're kind of sitting here and waiting, going, okay, when's that next develop? I guess for you and me, we like the developmental cards. We like the week-to-week cards. We like the guys who are title holders making a quality title defense. And when the PBC came in and kind of shook up the game, a lot of people didn't like it, but there were a lot of fight dates. That's what came with that. Do you remember that in 2015 where you just had too much boxing? You were probably a young buck. You were probably about 20 when that happened. You were probably like, oh my God, boxing's on everything. And the weird thing about right now is the game is changing, but there's not that same activity.
But the thing that disturbs me about it, Lukie, is it's changing in the sense that it's just sort of disappearing. And I'm not saying that disappearance is permanent. But when one major promoter has 0 dates, that's not a transition. That's just something vanishing. You know what I mean?
And I do think that dates will be announced, you know. It's just it's a weird time in boxing, bipolar boxing. It seems like a lot of big fighters are waiting for each other to make their moves more than 20 years ago. Not many top guys just want to stay busy. I think that's also got like a stay busy fight. Maybe athletes in general who don't want to take a pay cut, whereas maybe old school fighters be like, okay, I'll fight a little more often, stay active. I'll fight in my local area and get paid less, but I'm just going to do a hometown fight and I'm going to stay active in that. And I think that, like, to be perfectly honest, and maybe I'm wrong, I think a lot of fighters back in the day loved boxing more than the modern era guys. You know, I think that there's more of a, I think where the inactivity stems from, and this will sound funny, but it stems from social media. Like, you get on, like, if someone goes on Instagram, they're like, oh man, how many followers does he have? Oh, he's a real cool guy. He's got 100,000. And that translates into, I got to get paid this much because I got this many followers and I got to be this. And you don't see many guys that are like, okay, if I fight 4 times a year, not all 4 of those fights can be at my max contract number, because it's just not possible. And you saw it with Golovkin, but that's even a different era before social media. But I do think that social media has tilted the scale a little bit on the perception of market value and all that stuff.
Well, there's no doubt about that.
Okay, so now let's go into the next one. ProBox TV has a card, a banger of a card, as they always do. I can't say this guy's name. Yukabov is taking on William Foster III. It's a real good. It's Friday night. It's ProBox. You know, ProBox always gives you a banger of a fight, so you're gonna enjoy it for sure. But basically 2 top 15, top 20 junior lightweights competing. Would you like a little bit of research on this one, or do you have a thought?
I mean, my personal opinion, as much as I like Foster a lot, it just, I think that Yakubov is going to be just physical and rough enough to make it a rough fight for Foster. But I'd also see a world where Foster can outbox Yakubov kind of the way that Shock did. But this is a 50-50 fight right here, bro.
mean, it's a great banger of a fight because it's like you got two guys who are really interesting fights. Foster always struck me as someone that could win a title. That's always been my feeling. But then you have with Yakubov, only loss is to Oshaki Foster in 2022. You know, that's his only loss.
Good fight too.
And it wasn't like it was an easy fight for Shock. You know, that was a good physical fight. I believe that was when they had internet. You just went to a website and watched the fights back then in 2022. I forget what the thing was. Remember watching that in the middle of the day. But I think this is a good fight because the styles make a great fight for this, right? You got a physical guy who can box, and then you got kind of more of a clean boxer. William Foster, I think, is a criminally underrated fighter. Yakubov is just really, really a physical puncher, in my opinion.
Yeah, who was that first fight that Foster lost the decision to? Do you remember?
Well, I can do research. I know one was probably to who's the left-handed guy? It's Henry LeBron, and then he lost one to Ardson Garcia, who's a guy that's heavily touted out of Texas. People really are high on Garcia. He's 20-1. Won a unanimous decision over him, but people have high hopes for him. So to me, Foster is a really top-tier fighter. He holds a win over Edwin De Los Santos, kind of in a transitionary period of ShoBox. Like, that was kind of a really fun era of ShoBox where, like, Showtime was getting out, but they were starting to bring on new talent that you would have seen in the future. And I think that was one of my favorite versions of ShoBox was when he won that fight over Edwin De Los Santos. That was like I remember at the time being like, man, this is such a cool Northeastern fight. And, you know, somehow Foster wins, but he hasn't quite made that impact De Los Santos has.
Losing close decisions, bro. You take tough fights, you lose close decisions, and you know, if he wins this fight, it's really him becoming a guy that's won some and lost some at the top, as opposed to a guy who consistently kind of drops close decisions at this level.
Yeah, and for Yakubov, it's just like the only fight he's lost has been to Shock Foster, who could arguably be the best guy in the division. So, I mean, I think that the level of once again, Mark DeLuca, right? What he said in my column, momentum, right? The level of momentum, and with these guys, it's that momentum. And one guy, you know, he doesn't know what you don't know if he can win the close decision. The other guy, I don't think he doubts it. Bipolar boxing, hopefully ProBox becomes like Friday Night Fights used to be. We need a weekly boxing show to look forward to. I mean, that really, the Friday Night Fights being gone, I think has hurt boxing because that was a great
fight. Do you remember all the fights that were on Versus back in the day too? That was
well, yeah, with Bernard Hopkins fighting on. I mean, we just basically need like a weekly show that could give a budget to club show promoters, but make like a good 50-50 main event and then showcase some prospects. Like, if we could get that once a week, that would fulfill my needs as a sicko, as a degenerate boxing person, I think. Also on this card, we got Sterling Castillo, a good up-and-comer, taking on Shenard Bunch. It's definitely a sink-or-swim fight for both. You know, it's like they both have taken losses. They're closer to being journeymen, with no disrespect, than they are to being like, you know, guys that are going for the title. A loss for either one of these guys is going to be tough.
I can't remember if I've seen either of these guys.
Sterling Castillo, off the top of my head, I'll go into the research, but I'm pretty sure Sterling Castillo beat Miguel Contreras, the caveman, on a DAZN card when, what's his name, Zepeda beat Hector Tananahara.
I saw this kid Bunch when he fought Boca Chica. I remember that fight. I'm looking at his boxers right now. Which is one? Really when he fought Boca Chica. But my phone's mad slow and I can't find the other guy. So riveting podcasting I'm doing right now.
No, I know. I'm looking to see if I'm right on this. Let's see. Arturon. Yeah, he beat Miguel Contreras, fought to a draw, beat
I definitely have not seen Castillo. I've definitely never seen Castillo. I've only seen Bunch.
You've never seen Castillo? He's been on a lot of ProBox cards, and that win over Miguel Contreras was a really big one because Contreras was coming off of stopping Rolando Vargas, who was an up-and-comer on the bubble. And then Sterling Castillo looked like he might make that next leap. And then Otarar Arizanian beat him. And then he kind of won some tough fights, one of which against Jesus Siracho, but he's kind of been a ProBox fixture. If you tune into ProBox, he's had a few fights on ProBox. And Shenard Bunch, I was there when he lost to Brian Flores. He was completely in control of that fight. He dropped Flores in the first round. It looked like he was going to stop him. And then Flores changed the momentum and outworked him to a split decision. And he's only fought once since that fight. He hasn't fought for basically 2 years, practically. Actually, I think it's officially 2 years now. So it's coming off a big layoff. So, I mean, for Shenard Bunch, he had a lot of hype. People really, really deep amateur career. There was a lot of hope. So to me, there's not a lot of momentum with either guy. This is an exciting fight. Castillo didn't throw much in his last split decision win. To me, it comes down to the body of Shenard Bunch. If Bunch's body is healthy, he should be able to beat Castillo because Castillo's a good fighter. He's just not outstanding, if that makes sense. He's solid, but he doesn't have, and Shenard Bunch has some explosive traits, and he can do a couple of things that I think could give Castillo problems. Problem is, I think he had like 300 amateur fights, and I guess my question is how much of his body is left from all those fights?
Yeah.
Was that way too much on that card?
I think it was just the right amount, bub.
Also on that card, we got the Valle brothers. All three Valle brothers will be fighting Dominique Marquez and another Valle brother who I don't have in my show notes. Really like the Valle brothers. I've gotten to see them on the ProBox developmental circuit as they've been going. So that's cool to see that one. I think we're all very excited about seeing the Valle brothers on this card. And then we go over to UFC Fight Pass. Dakota's a huge UFC Fight Pass fan. And we're going to see Omar Trinidad in action. Omar Trinidad, have you ever seen him fight yet?
I have not, brother.
I was doing the show notes, and I was hoping that you might say something more than just 2 words, but that's it. So he's in a main event fight. The co-feature is a really good one. Hirota is the WBO junior bantamweight women's champion. She is really good. She looks like a character, larger than life personality. She's taking on the girl.
She's a lot of fun.
Naomi Cardenas Gomez, who just beat Bree Howling on an MVP card. So this is someone that just pulled off an upset, is fighting her. I think it's a really interesting matchup. Wouldn't be shocked if there's a potential draw or upset here. And then I'd also say Guadalupe Medina is someone who's trending the right way with this promotion. She's in another tough fight too, taking on Ruby Gutierrez, who recently fought friend of the program, Brooke Siberian. So if you have a chance on Friday, ProBox ends or whatever, jump over to the 360 promotions card. I think, to me, Omar Trinidad really reminds me a lot of Danny Roman.
That's a good comparison. And I always liked Danny Roman as much as he was a come forward guy. I always liked his patience. I liked how he picked his shots. He was a little bit more of a calculated pressure fighter. And those guys generally make for fun but thoughtful fights.
I mean, Roman, let's see, Lukie, with the Hirota, what's with the Hirota? I wouldn't say hate. I just would say Hirota is a fighter who I think is outstanding. She's the best fighter in the division, I think. I think she has the chance to be like a superstar. But it could be wrong. In January, and when I saw her last fight, I was expecting a little bit more. And I think that what I'm seeing is her developing as a fighter with Manny Robles and Edgar Jasso, with them bringing, like, I think they've worked together for 4 or 5 fights now. I think there's a little transition period. So I think she's very, very good, but I think that she's like, there's a development there. So it's a weird one where I think she's the best fighter in the division. She's the best title holder, yet I think she's still learning. It's kind of like Anthony Joshua, right? Joshua at one time arguably could have been the best guy in the division because of the belts, but he was kind of like a basic boxer who was still learning things that a lot of guys already knew. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. I could see that comparison, but I think that I think like Joshua though, there's substance to her.
For sure. I just think that also I think people are underrating this opponent. This opponent came in and fought Bree Howling. Bree is someone that had a good team around her, and she outworked her. And people that come in, you know, fighters that come in and throw a lot of punches and have a big volume, those are guys or girls that pull off upsets. So I'm just saying, this is like, you know, I think this fight could be a lot closer than people think. Walsh was supposed to headline, were it not for the cut. Okay, so this is going to originally be a Callum Walsh card potentially. Interesting is what they said.
Not surprising. It seems like most of the 360 cards are Callum Walsh headlines.
Well, they got Callum Walsh, Sarai Boachuk, King Sandoval, and Omar Trinidad. Most promoters have their staple of guys, and then you have to elevate to that level to get, you know, the main event spot, you know. So those are the guys that I feel they trust. Now let's go to where we probably should have started. Kenny Sims, Oscar Duarte. What were your thoughts?
It was such a classic, bro. I mean, it was really it's just like another typical fight of the year candidate from Kenny Sims, who is, while he's a calculated, smart boxer, has found himself in these kinds of fights on multiple occasions now. In this fight, in the Akhmedov fight, and it was really a combination of Duarte largely out physicaling and outworking Kenny in the pocket, and then Kenny randomly kind of giving Duarte a boxing lesson for a round, notably in my mind the 5th and the 8th, and those rounds would kind of change the momentum for a little bit, and then Duarte would get back into his thing. And it felt like to me that, and there's very few guys that have been, you know, saying that Kenny Sims needed a shot more than me, but I felt like Duarte edged it. I felt like his work was just a more damaging in terms of the volume, and even at times when he wasn't landing, they were getting blocked or he's landing on the shoulders. I think with his power, those were still having impact. Those were still slowing Kenny down. Kenny had a hard time making Duarte miss altogether, and I think that caught up with him as the fight went on. But, you know, it's two guys at the top of their weight. There was like an organic, homegrown fan base that was excited to be there. Like that's the kind of shit that I'm in boxing for. You know what I mean? Is that we're in boxing for, are those kinds of nights.
What do you think of this comment from Man K Crazy?
Should Sims be training his upper body? I mean, I would imagine he is, right? I mean, I don't know. I would imagine he is. If you're saying that you think Kenny should bulk up, I think that, you know, that becomes a little more tricky when you're a guy his size getting down to 140. I don't think he has any bulk to give, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think to me what I saw was Duarte is really kind of becoming like a Maidana like fighter with Robert Garcia. Robert Garcia is kind of almost doing the Maidana playbook with Duarte. And that confidence that he's getting now, like it really feels like even though he lost to Ryan Garcia, Duarte is really, really confident and has a real big belief in himself that he is an ace. I'm the A-side fighter. I'm going to be a world champion. And he's a different guy than the guy that fought Ryan Garcia, you know? And it feels like,
and he's a way different guy than the guy that fought, of course, now I'm going to forget his name, but he fought a veteran maybe a little before COVID. And he got kind of a boxing lesson. And I remember watching that fight and thinking, I don't know about this guy. Like, you know, he's got a lot to learn. Maybe there's something there, but if he's getting to this level and looks this lost, I don't even really see what there is to build on. And he's just gotten a little better every fight. And then he has the fight with Ryan, and of course he loses. And it's just 4 like good fucking wins since then, man, that kind of put him right back in position. And in some ways, probably ahead of Ryan, who's, you know, now coming off of the Rolly loss.
Adrian Estella is the name of the fighter you're probably referencing.
There's so many names, Lukie. You know, I do my best. I pull a good name out of the hat, but sometimes it's just not there.
To me, the big thing with Duarte is he's learned how to be a more efficient fighter. So, like, it's not just the skills. It's like he's not having to overextend himself or exert too much energy.
Robert taught him how to get in position.
But it's like it's the same thing with Maidana, where he's getting his feet there, he's pumping a jab, And then he's like, they're not really changing his identity as a fighter. It's more so, let's work on your feet. Let's get the jab off. And then let's make this shit happen. And I think that's the big thing with Duarte. I think with Kenny, the problem is, man, like really, really good fighter, but it just seems like he's had a lot of hard fights. And this is just another physical hard fight on top of it. Another thing that should be brought up is the 2-minute round. What did you think of that 2-minute round?
That was so fucking weird, dude. And I don't know. There's got to be some kind of recourse for that. Like, I don't know. In the moment, I don't know how you make that call, but there's got to be another minute added on to something. Like, I don't know, bro. I don't think that's right.
That minute,
especially
that
in a
round
close fight like that, Lukie. There's no
but
doubt.
What I'm going to ask is, do you think that changed the outcome of the fight? Do you think if that went one more minute, that Kenny could have won the round?
No, but it has a butterfly effect on the rest of the fight. I don't think it's a make or break, but it's like if you got a close fight like that and there's an officiating error that shortens a round like that, how can it not have an impact?
Okay. And then we go to the undercard, kind of not the depth of undercard that we were probably hoping for, but Regis Prograis and Jojo Diaz gave us classic. Dakota, what did you think of that fight?
I mean, my immediate thought, not that it was as good, but it reminded me of Gotti Ward immediately, because it's two guys that once were at a certain position who weren't quite at the top of their game and have maybe like run out of places to go to get a top fight. And you saw Jojo, like Mickey Ward, coming forward, clearly impacting Regis with everything he was throwing, basically having his legs out from under him from the first round on. And Regis in long stretches really outboxing Jojo, and you could see it on Jojo's face by the end of the fight. There was long stretches of the fight where Regis was just putting together beautiful combinations and there wasn't anything coming back. And I had no concept that fight was going to be that good, or that fought that, passionately, or that Jojo would be that good and be able to hurt Regis and use his physicality. But it was pitched as like a do or die. Do they have anything left? And I think they both have something left, but they're certainly not what they once were. And Regis still has the hand speed. He's still got good feet when they're under him, but like he clearly just doesn't have world-class punch resistance anymore. A former featherweight hurting him every single round. And for Jojo, it's like, you got a guy hurt that bad, bro, for 10 rounds. You got to get him out of there. You just got to get him out of there if you got a guy that hurt. And he couldn't put together that sequence to make that happen. You got to give Regis some credit for that, but it was a great fight to watch. It was one of those like stand up and clap at the end, but like, I don't know where either of these guys go that matters to me other than fighting each other again. Because I just
like if you match them with other guys that are younger, the outcomes could get weird.
Yeah, they're just not. It's not. There's something. There's no doubt that they both have something left in the tank, but what they don't have left in the tank is going to make it really hard at a higher level. I mean, imagine Regis, the way he looked in this fight. You telling me Subriel Matias is not laying him the fuck out, or somebody with some real power is not going to really hurt him? That makes you concerned for a guy's health. When somebody like Jojo, who wasn't a big puncher at featherweight, is doing that to you every clean shot. Every clean shot.
Well, I think the jarring thing for me, and I'm a fan of Regis and Jojo, is the first round. Jojo rocks Regis.
And every other round. It was, every round had one of those moments. And it was
the one that shocked me. Was like he got rocked in the very first round, which starts to make me wonder, like, okay, like Jojo's put some weight on. Maybe he's getting into like quote unquote man strength. He's gone through some stuff. Maybe he's more physical. But typically, if a guy like Jojo who's not known for his power, it's going to be in that second half of the fight. He's going to break you down and catch you. The fact that he caught him in the first round was kind of a mind melter to me.
Yeah, and listen, Jojo is not a bad puncher. I'm not saying he's a feather fist. It's just that he hasn't traditionally been like a big knockout guy. And Regis has gone 12 rounds with Josh Taylor. So I didn't have any, none of us had any indication that was even a possibility.
It's a good fight. I respect Regis for wanting to be a 3-time world champion. It's a hard road. It's a hard road because
this
it's
weight,
like,
bro. Where do you go if you're him?
And I will say this: both of the fighters' bodies look different than in their prime, which is something that like I always take a little notice of. Like, you know, when the bodies don't. I'm not saying they're out of shape. I'm a little concerned that Regis overtrains at this point in his career because he looked like a guy that was a little overtrained, possibly. I don't know if that's fact.
It would explain his punch resistance. I mean, listen, bro. That's the first thing that goes if you cut too much weight is your punch resistance. That's the first thing.
And to me, JoJo, it's like he's not like you look at when he came out of the Olympics, you wouldn't even recognize him. It's like he's such a different fighter. Yeah, I think it's a great fight, but it's kind of like, you know, we live in this world of where do they go next? Well, there is no next for really these guys. It's like they get the phone call for whatever option. I mean, maybe Regis versus Ryan Garcia.
Sure, but the minute Ryan lands something clean, he's not going to be able to deal with it. I just don't see that.
JoJo versus Ryan?
That maybe has more potential because I trust JoJo's durability, but he doesn't have the volume. But the reason why that would still be interesting is because Ryan's not reliable, not because of JoJo.
Man K Crazy says Prograis did say he overtrained versus Haney. Good eye, Lukie. I mean, to me, the way his body looked, he looked in phenomenal shape, but it almost looked like 2 in shape. That's what I saw when I saw him. I was like, oh no. Do you know what I'm talking about, Dakota? Where you don't want someone to step on the scale too. Yeah, like you want them to kind of look like they're a boxer, not like they've been in the gym too much.
He was fit, but he didn't have the juice. Like he wasn't getting cardio tired, but he couldn't handle the physicality of a world-class boxing match. And I don't think
which might be, and that might literally be
cardio's fine, right?
Right? Leaving it in the gym. Like you might have wanted to have such a good performance that you know, you just
or his body's really not supposed to go to 140 at 37 years old. You know,
that's also be it. Now let's go over my guy. I called it. Ricardo Sandoval upset Kenshiro Teraji. Okay, it happened. What did you think?
No shocker, right? Like I hadn't seen Sandoval, but there's no shocker to me that a competent contender could come in and edge one out. I don't remember if I've seen Kenshiro since the move up to 112, but I've seen a whole lot of his fights down at
his Akai fight was a banger. It's like the best fight of the year.
Well, but I've seen plenty. I've seen at least 5-6 of his fights down at 108, and I've never seen a fight where he just didn't get hit so clean every single round. And so it's never a shocker to me when a guy like that is just too hittable for somebody and loses a close decision. Now, he did the championship thing where he hung in there. He got the knockdown. You know, he stayed engaged. He's clearly a natural winner, but he's as vulnerable as he's always been.
Well, I think the other thing, too, why I was high on this is Sandoval had pulled off upsets earlier in his career against Brent Venegas and Jay Harris. He hadn't looked as good lately, but I think part of that is athlete's depression, or what I call athlete's depression, when guys are close to title fights, but they're not getting them, and they can't quite get that same motivation in the gym because they feel like they're just taking that same contender fight over and over. A guy like Kenshiro, when he moved up in weight, I feel like any fight he took against a guy that I knew was pretty good, you could always kind of think that this might be the end of the run, because I really truly believe he was 108 was the ideal weight class for him. And going to 112, the power isn't going to be as much of an impact. And if he goes to 115, the guy's just hit too hard. I truly believe he's a historically great 108-pound fighter, but he's just one of those guys where his skill set and his size and everything had to play a role. That weight class was the perfect weight class for him. And I just think it almost went the wrong earlier this year when he fought the champion at 112. It's an exciting fight, but if you watch it, it was back and forth, action fight. And then in this one, you know, it just happened.
And down in, you know, in his lower weight title run, a lot of times he was relying on late stoppages, and it just doesn't seem like that's going to be as much of an option at a weight class where his power is not as impactful. But it was impactful. He did put the kid on his ass. It's not that he has no power at this weight. It's just a different thing.
It's just when he hits guys, it's not game over. There was a point in his career he hits you, it's over. And I think he's an extremely good fighter. I think he's going to be one of these guys that's both overrated and underrated. His achievements in his division are underrated. And I also think it's kind of like Inoue, right? A lot of guys like, Inoue is an untraditional fighter, and his skill set, I think, is often overrated, but his achievements are underrated. I think a lot of times because it's like a nuanced weight class, only the hardcore follow it. A guy like Kenshiro might get a little overrated just because people want to say, I'm a really big fan of this guy. Look at his accomplishments, which his accomplishments are great, but skill set for skill set, he was kind of a guy who was the best mold for a 108-pound fighter.
It's just too hittable, Lukie. He's just too hittable to be in that conversation. And to me, he always has been. And people say that I'm a hater on Kenshiro, but I watch all his fights and I enjoy them. So I'm definitely not a hater. But what I am is you and I have seen enough to know if a guy is that hittable, there's a ceiling.
That's right. Okay, well, I think that's the show this week. Where can people follow you, Dakota?
You can always follow me at the Slip and Weave Podcast. You can always catch me on the Lukie Boxing Show. You can always check me out at ITR Boxing. Go check out the Fight Life with Price Taylor. It came out a couple weeks ago. I'm working on a new one right now with Mio Yoshida, so keep your eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. And I'm out here, son.
Okay. Well, take care. That is this week's show.